Hi, everyone. Hi. Welcome to IdeaScale's 2024 Government Innovation Summit. My name is Lizzie Fontaine. I'm the marketing manager here at IdeaScale for the public sector. So great to have you all here today, both in Washington, D.C. That's where we're live streaming from. We also have people joining us online from all over the globe, so welcome. Before we kick things off, just a few things to get us going. One, the event is recorded, and so everyone will get it in an email afterwards. Two, we have a build your own innovation kit at the back of the room with a bunch of fun stuff for all of us here in person. If you're interested, definitely check that out. And then three, we have a raffle in the lounge area, and that was for a $100 gift card to Founding Farmers, if anyone's ever been there. So great DC restaurant. And it also comes with a cookbook with a lot of fun recipes. To enter that, just meet one of our innovation advisors in the lounge and share yourself, your family, your children's Halloween costume, very timely, and you're entered to win that random raffle. We will be drawing it at 4 p.m., so try and stop by before then. And here's today's agenda. We are here from 1 to 4 p.m. with presentations, workshops, a networking break. It's going to be a jam-packed afternoon. And then at 4:05, we'll kick things off for a happy hour. And here's our wonderful speakers. Can we get a round of applause for them? Thank you. We wouldn't be here without them, so I'm so excited for everyone to get to know them more and just learn about their organizations and what the work they do. And I just briefly want to touch upon who IdeaScale is and why we brought you here today. So we're in open innovation, we're an innovation industry, but really our bread and butter is crowdsourcing. So we empower organizations to harness crowdsourcing and drive innovation. We were actually founded by a White House initiative, and today we empower 4.5 million users annually to share their ideas. So it's really exciting. We brought you here to share best practices, connect, really just meet each other and kind of build this community of practice. So thank you for coming. And now I'd like to introduce you to Tim Sussman, SVP Head of Global Public Sector at IdeaScale. Woo!
Good afternoon, everyone. To our virtual attendees from around the world, and to all of you here in person, friends, partners, customers, collaborators, thank you for joining us today. It's so special to get everyone here and in person. Get out of your offices, from all of you here around the DMV who are coming in from out of town. It's so special to have everyone here today. As we kick off the summit on modernizing government and fostering collaboration to drive innovation, I want to start by asking you all a question. What was your barrier moment? Think of a time when you faced an obstacle, whether in a project, with technology, or in trying to bring people together for a common purpose. What pushed you forward? What was your barrier moment? These are the moments that define us, the ones where we face a barrier and decide to push beyond it. What was your barrier moment? Today is about breaking barriers together. It's about moving forward in pursuit of something greater. So here's what I hope each of you takes away from our time together. First, actionable insights. Real steps you can bring back to work starting tomorrow or after Halloween. Second, new perspectives. Innovation requires us to challenge our current ways of thinking and look at our roles differently, not just as contributors, but your roles as change makers in government and education. And third, a focus on collaboration. I want all of you to look around the room. Look at the person next to you, the people next to you. We cannot solve today's complex challenges in isolation. We need each other to truly forge ahead. What was your barrier moment? We're committed to serving the public sector with integrity, and that means we need innovation now more than ever. The specific needs of your agencies, the mission, and the people you serve depend on your courage to step beyond the familiar. Today, you'll hear about the latest innovations in technology, strategy, and implementation. But it's not just about the what. It's about understanding the why. Why do we need innovation in government? And why do we need it now? The answer is simple. We're building a legacy of progress. With every small win, with each incremental improvement, with every employee you champion, each of you plays a vital role in the future of your mission. We're in a unique position to influence change, not only through technology, but through our actions. Changing behavior and inspiring others to do the same starts with a vision. You each have a role in shaping that vision. Whether you're working on the future of transportation, defense, public health, policy, remember, you're the reason change is possible. You are the reason. So I challenge you today to go beyond just listening. At the refreshment table, beautiful refreshment table in the back, look at the person behind you. Turn to the person behind you. Sitting down, look at the person next to you and ask, what was your barrier moment? Ask questions, share ideas, and connect with others. Most importantly, find the reason you want to push beyond the barriers. Because when you do, you become a part of the legacy we're building together. Thank you. Let's forge ahead. It's my pleasure to introduce our first speaker, Mohammed Abdelkader, Chief Innovation Officer at USAID. That's the United States Agency for International Development. Thank you, Mohammed.
Thank you. Thanks, Tim. Thanks to the whole IdeaScale team. Thanks, Lizzie, for the invitation and getting us set up. How's everybody doing today? There's a mic here. I probably need to use the mic, actually. Hey, I see some old friends in the back. Hey, folks. Yeah, everybody doing well? Beautiful weather outside. I wish we could do this outside, but we're here. You're stuck with me for a few minutes. Let me make sure I stay on camera as well. Tim, I'm going to take your prompt about a breakthrough moment and maybe give you a little context about who I am and why this work is important to me. My breakthrough moment, look, my parents immigrated to the United States from Egypt. I was born in New York City a long time ago. And a lot of my childhood was spent going back and forth, summers overseas to visit family. I don't know how many folks kind of identify that and how many folks here are like children of immigrants. Sorry. A lot of my childhood was spent going back and forth. So summers I'd be in Egypt, and and I say this frequently, my cousins on the playground would ask me if I'd met Michael Jordan or Sylvester Stallone, and I hadn't. And they'd asked if my dad had driven a Ferrari, and my graduate student father did not drive a Ferrari, in fact. And I noticed on the flip side, I grew up a little bit in New York and a little bit in South Carolina. And in South Carolina, I would notice that a lot of my friends would ask questions about life in Egypt. What was it like? Sometimes these questions were pretty benign. Sometimes they were not so benign, as you can imagine. And I also noticed that a lot of my classmates, even when I got to college, a lot of my classmates had never traveled to even Atlanta or Charlotte, which were about 2 hours away from where I grew up. And I started to think about that as a problem. And as a kid spending time overseas, I was like, wow, like I just wish people were exposed to the world around them. Even sometimes just that quick layover in Europe would open my eyes. I'd hear different languages. And I was really inspired by that, by what it was like to live in a different part of the world. What challenge did they face? What common challenges did we have? And that sort of became what I crystallized around when I got to college. That was the problem that I wanted to solve. I wanted to make sure folks were connected because what I saw in the news was oftentimes policy being made, and I don't know why a 15, 16-year-old was thinking of policy, but I was seeing decisions that were made, and I often felt like, gosh, if these folks were just exposed overseas, if they had that lived experience, maybe the policy making would be better. So that was a bit of my breakthrough moment. I decided to pursue a career primarily in education, a little bit of focus on international ed policy, eventually ed tech, some innovation sprinkled in, and sort of with this bigger theme of human development. And I saw these big public institutions like universities as just a great platform to solve for some of these problems. So that was some of my breakthrough moment. That's a little bit about me. I love college football. I don't have any orange on today. I'm a big Clemson Tigers fan. I like to ski, and I love U2, the band, but I love you all as well. That's a little bit about me. Let's jump right in. I know our time is limited today. Who knows what the U.S. Agency for International Development does? I know you do. You work there. All right, you guys do. So a lot of folks don't know what USAID does. Any guesses? Any guesses? All right, we'll talk about it in a second. Some people sort of perceive USAID as the agency that shows up to deliver humanitarian aid. When there's a crisis, we're there to help. But beyond that, a lot of folks sort of envision USAID as giving out these big bags of grain and rice that say from the American people. And that's a little bit of what we do, but there's so much more. And how we do it is also really cool. So I have the honor of serving as the Chief Innovation Officer for the agency and also the Executive Director of the Innovation, Technology, and Research Hub within a bureau called the Inclusive Growth and Partnerships and Innovation Bureau. It's a mouthful, but we love acronyms in government. Let's jump right in. A little bit about the agency. It was founded in 1961, sort of on the tail end. After World War II, there was a recognition, of course, that the United States needed to engage diplomatically with the world, that we needed a strong defense. But as many of you in Washington know about these 3Ds, the third sort of D was there, and that was development. And that the United States needed to commit to resources and a strategy that would help advance human development around the world. What does human development really mean? It's basically about making people's lives better. Can I go to the next slide? This thing's not clicking. Okay. So some of our priorities, some of our priority areas you can see on the screen, things like food and water security. We think about the climate crisis, democratic backsliding, basically a lot of like really sticky, difficult, complicated issues that we all face, right? We all face these things. It's not just about those countries over there. We face them here at home and we're all interconnected. And if the last perhaps 20 years I was reflecting, I graduated college in 2001, sort of thinking, oh, the war in the Balkans was over, globalization had taken hold. I was like, oh, everything is exciting. And then, we had 9/11, and then we had the global financial crisis, and then we had this thing called COVID, and very quickly began to see that our fates are truly intertwined. And a lot of the big overarching sort of things that are happening in the world, we're all in this together. So I think that's why USAID does what it does. And we work at a sectoral level across humanitarian assistance. We think about global health, global stability, of course, empowering women and girls. And we do that. A big part of our work is sort of catalyzing innovation because we recognize these are big, hairy challenges. Again, why? The world is literally on fire. How many of you live here in DC? You guys remember summer of 2023? I don't know if any of you all were driving down the National Mall. We had a tough time seeing the Washington Monument because of smoke that was coming in from Canada. I don't know about you all, but I was pretty startled by that. Couldn't even see the monument. The sky was like a really alarming shade of orange. I didn't grow up in Northern California, so that wasn't part of sort of my experience. I don't have asthma, but I found it really tough to breathe. So just that very simple existence of breathing was difficult. But yet this is such a reality for so many people around the world. These big climate shocks, we call them climate shocks, that are impacting people's ability to go to work, people's ability to learn, people's ability to transact and access healthcare, and all of the things, and it just sort of erodes at that stability. But that is more and more, that is happening more and more with increasing intensity around the planet. And because climate change sees no borders, it doesn't care that there's a border between the US and Canada, it's still going to impact us. So in many ways, these are some pretty hairy and tough challenges that we have to tackle. So I'm going to jump in a little bit more about the unit that I oversee, innovation, technology, and research, and not to talk about them structurally, but to talk about them from a subject matter. Why are they important at USAID? So first, these are really tough challenges. We have to deploy the newest tools and approaches and mobilize our partner networks to tackle these things. Tim, you mentioned earlier, we can't go at this alone, and same thing at USAID. Regardless of our budget as a federal agency, we can't go at it alone. It's never enough. We never have enough people, never have enough time, never have enough money. So we have to go at it with others. So a little bit about our innovation work. Our focus is really to source, test, and scale and increase, frankly, adoption of things that are evidence-based, that we think are going to have impact, that are cost-effective, that can reach millions of people. Second is we try to deploy technology also at scale, because we know that technology in a healthy digital ecosystem, one that is safe, secure, open, and inclusive, can really be a catalyst for good. But we also have to be mindful of the harms, and we'll talk about that in a bit. And then, of course, research underpins so much of this. So we do a lot of work in supporting primarily post-secondary institutions in really strengthening their work around science for development. We'll talk about that more in a bit, but this is just a framing. So why innovate? I know a lot of you guys come from an open innovation mindset. We've got the same. A good idea can come from anyone, anywhere, at any time. USAID operates 82 missions around the world, serving 100 countries. And these are primarily low and middle income countries. So we're not really like in Western Europe. We are in some of the most difficult, challenging places around the world. Places with sometimes without strong economies, sometimes places that are just very difficult, a lot of challenging structural elements that are there. But a good idea can come from anyone, anywhere, at any time. And we try to facilitate the sourcing of innovations from folks. Two, our challenges aren't going away. So as I mentioned earlier, we've got to find a higher return on investment. We're using US taxpayer dollars. So we've got to make sure that we're making good decisions with our resources. And how do we do that in a time of budget challenges? A lot of you guys who are in the federal government know that this is a continual issue for us. And then third, how are we bringing stakeholders along for the ride? Other donor governments, foundations, technology companies, local innovator entrepreneurs, faith-based communities, right? Our network of stakeholders has to constantly expand, and we've got to bring people along for the ride because we all share in these issues that we're trying to solve. And then finally, accelerating localized implementation. With all due respect to the folks here in DC, sometimes the best ideas don't come from around the Beltway, right? One of the things that we've done at the agency, Administrator Samantha Power has prioritized local development. What does that mean? That for us operationally, that 25% of the money that we spend is spent on local partners, not just folks here in DC. Local partners who are closest to the issues that we're trying to solve. So I want to talk a little bit about how we operationalize some of this within our team. And I'm going to get a little bit into the nitty gritty. We've got two teams that really power our innovation work at USAID. We don't own them. It happens all over the agency, but these are two groups that are really driving it. The first is our Development Innovation Ventures team, and the second is our Exploratory Programs team. So the DIV program almost acts like a venture capital fund, right? So we have these almost like a VC fund. We don't take equity. But if you are an entrepreneur or an innovator in Nairobi or Cairo, or you're in Vietnam, or you're in Indonesia, and you have an idea and you can submit it to DIV and we'll fund it. You got to have a little bit of evidence that it works and show that there is really a pathway to scale. Evidence is the key point here. The second is our EPIC program, exploratory programs and innovation competitions. And that's sort of the flip side. That's the other side of the coin. We define a problem. We say destructive wildfires are a problem. We try to raise money around it. We try to basically set up a program around that, and then we go from there. Problem could be around plastics in the ocean that we're trying to remove. Problem could be around better forecasting of medical supplies on pharmacy shelves in rural Botswana. We can get really specific. We can be really general. I'll show you some examples of that because it's kind of cool. So back to the DIV program. Again, I mentioned rigorous evidence. We look for cost effectiveness, and we look for a pathway to scale. This is a little bit of the numbers. We're super proud of the work that's being done in the DIV program, the Development Innovation Ventures. You can see number of awards, pretty significant reach in terms of our beneficiaries, and we do measure social impact. We think of ultimately what is the ROI. on those investments. Let's drill down a little bit deeper. What do some of the investments look like? So one of the companies that we've invested in, maybe to step back, for many farmers around the world, they may not have access to, weather.com, or they may not have access to the latest weather forecasting. But we've invested in a company called Ignitia that very quickly sends very rich, data-rich weather alerts to single-holder farmers in different parts of the world using an SMS message. Why is that important? Because it gives them a heads up if there's a flood on the way, helps them prepare for droughts, helps them prepare for different weather events. That's important because there's an impact there to food security. If a flood comes in and wipes out someone's crops, there's an impact to food security. There's an impact to how much money they bring in and the kind of food they can put on the table for their own families. So again, small investments can make a big difference. Vision Spring. So not all of our investments are technology related. I'm one to say that innovation doesn't always equal digital technology, right? So let's sort of differentiate the two. Some of our investments seem a little more analog or low tech. Some of you may know that around the world, limitations in vision have resulted in about a $200 billion loss economically around the world. Big problem. And there's implications for mental health, for safety, yada, yada, yada. Imagine what your life would be like if you couldn't see. I see a lot of people in here with glasses. How many of you guys wear contacts? I do. Imagine waking up every day and just not being able to see. Think of the limitations that brings, right? Of course, there's a gender component of that too, certainly in low and middle income countries that we see. But this is a significant issue. So we made an investment into this company called Vision Spring, two actually. The first was to help them lower the cost of glasses. So again, think Warby Parker, but think on another level. So we helped them bring the cost of glasses down from $18 a unit to below $6. That resulted in 7 million more people being able to get these glasses on their faces. Really impactful here. And that's going to have an impact on learning. That has an impact on the truck driver in Pakistan who thinks he's just seeing smoke, doesn't realize he has a vision limitation. But with glasses, he's able to see and navigate the roads a little bit better. This helps the woman in Bangladesh who's working on a factory line, right? It has implications for quality control. So really, really, really interesting impact that we're trying to advance. Rainforest, a lot of you guys I'm sure are interested in climate and how does USAID use AI? This is a really exciting example. So we've invested in this organization called Rainforest Connection. So some of you may know that in the Amazon basin, of course, provides, you guys know, a lot of our oxygen that we breathe each and every day comes from the Amazon. Illegal logging is a big problem. And there's just not enough forest rangers to cover such a big landmass. We've invested in this company that essentially puts up listening devices, this thing right here, and it's AI powered and GIS powered, so that the device is not only listening for biodiversity to make sure that there are an adequate number of the different species of birds that need to be around and other mammals, but also listens for chainsaws. And when it listens and when it hears the sound of a chainsaw, it alerts a park ranger, and through the GIS coordinates, they're able to quickly respond. So pretty exciting stuff. Most people don't think that USAID does this kind of stuff. Onto the exploratory programs portfolio. So we do things like challenges and grand challenges, prizes and hackathons. These are just some of the methods that we deploy to problem solve around the world. You can see we just follow different pathways. I won't get into the nitty gritty, but we follow different pathways to really think about cultivating innovators, supporting them, and supporting the ecosystem to help sustain the work beyond the initial sort of engagement that we've got. One of the examples of a recent prize we did, I mentioned ocean plastics. We worked with Mombasa County government in Kenya. There was an ongoing issue of basically a lot of plastic in the ocean. And not only is that an environmental disaster, that also has impact on tourists, because I don't like to go to beaches when there's a lot of plastic on the beach. So this was an ongoing issue. We worked with, we basically set up this prize at a little over $1 million. So doesn't have to be super resource intensive. We did that in partnership with our local mission. We did that in partnership with the local government, set up this prize. And we had 9 teams 9 teams come out of an informal settlement. So these are young folks, young innovators, young entrepreneurs. And the winning team, I find this really exciting, pulled a bunch of plastic out of the water, recycled that plastic into 3D printing spool, and then solved yet another problem, which was that some of the local schools didn't have adequate school furniture. So they didn't have adequate desks. They used the 3D printing spool to print desks and then sold them back to the schools, solving 2 problems in one. So things like that, some of the prizes can help us solve multiple issues at once and mobilize, as I mentioned, some of our local partners. Really exciting. That's a smaller example. This is a much bigger one. A lot of folks hear the term grand challenges. So we are currently involved in something called the Water and Energy for Food Grand Challenge. Essentially, the focus of this grand challenge, where we have partnered up with all of these other partner governments, is to help farmers around the world increase their crop yield by using less energy and less water. These are some of our metrics. These are some of the things we're very proud of. So the number of end users, I don't know if can we move this top thing, Lizzie? Can we bring it down? Because it's over 500,000 farmers around the world have worked with this grand challenge. We have a website called, it's we4f4f.org. If you want to check it out, you can see a list of the innovations. But this is something that we could have only done in partnership, this grand challenge. So I would encourage you all, for those of you who are in government, I'm sure you guys are familiar with challenge.gov, great way to put some of these things out there to develop partnerships. But these are some of the metrics we're really proud of on this particular program. Yeah, let's go to the next one. Oh, sorry. All right. So on to technology. I want to talk a little bit about technology portfolio. In some ways, COVID really accelerated, for many of us personally, accelerated our own digital transformation. And I think for many of us in government, we've seen how it's really impacted our agencies. And USAID is no different. We've really been leaning into making really strategic investments. In particular now, it feels like every news article you read has a bit in there about artificial intelligence. So we're certainly deploying some cutting edge technologies to try to make a difference. But we want to do so in a responsible way. So as you all know, digital transformation is happening around the world. It's ubiquitous. It's not stopping. This is a transformational shift that we are living through, but that is not equal. Not everyone has access to that technology. And certainly in low and middle income countries, we're seeing how that's playing out. I'm not going to run through all the stats. You guys know this stuff. You can read it. Let's try to go to the next slide. Sorry. But there are a lot of gaps. Gaps in rural and urban areas. Some of our rural areas don't have equal access to broadband. Certainly in low and middle income countries, LMICs, lesser developed countries, and of course there's a gender gap in many parts of the world. Women simply don't have access to mobile technology. Let's try to go to the next one, please. So at USAID, the way we have set up our structure, just to get back into the mechanics, give you a sense of how we've set up our teams, these are some of the technical areas that we focus on. So everything from digital inclusion, digital societies and government, those of you who are familiar with work being done in Ukraine and Estonia, we certainly support those partner governments. We have a geo center that helps us make sure that our colleagues around the agency have geospatial tools in their hands. Why is that important? Because it helps us target a little bit better with our scarce resources. We're able to see things over time and makes the data a lot more rich. Of course, our emerging technologies team is spending a lot more time these days on artificial intelligence. We have a digital finance team. Actually, our whole unit started as a mobile money team years ago. And then cybersecurity. Cybersecurity is playing an increasingly large role in what we do. I think a lot of folks may look at USAID and say, why is cybersecurity important to a humanitarian aid agency? It'd probably be more important to some of the intelligence, community agencies, DoD, that makes sense. But why USAID? Any guesses? Any hands? Don't all jump in at once. Let me take a step. Well, for a couple of reasons. Think of the journalist who is writing about corruption, and then suddenly their phone starts to act funny. Think about our partner governments, like Ukraine, and all of the incoming cyber attacks that are happening. And think about the person who's going to an HIV clinic in a country like Uganda that's recently passed a pretty harsh anti-LGBTQ law, right? So we think about cybersecurity in all those different contexts. Let's go to the next slide. All of this is built on this notion of a safe, secure, open, and rights-respecting digital ecosystem. And you can see the different pieces of it. Digital society, digital economy, digital infrastructure, all of these things overlap and come together. I won't read this, but happy to get the slides to you if that's helpful. I talked a little bit about Ukraine earlier. Years and years ago, our agency had invested in essentially an anti-corruption program in Ukraine that was intended to digitize a lot of records and reduce corruption that way. That has grown into a digital tool called Dia. It's essentially an app. It is a super app. I would encourage you guys to do a quick search and look it up a little bit more, but it's a really impressive advancement. 120 interoperable services on this one app, secure. One of the things that's actually supposed to be 19 million, sorry. So almost now 20 million Ukrainians have accessed this app. Why is this important? I'll tell you why. Do you guys remember when the Syria crisis happened years ago, 2010? We didn't have a lot of these types of technologies back then, but I remember stories of a lot of Syrian refugees leaving and going to Europe. A lot of these folks were doctors, they were lawyers, they were dentists, but when they got to their destination, they didn't have their academic records. They couldn't access them because they were back in Damascus. Dia solves that. Dia solves that. So a lot of folks can not only access their academic records, but for those who are in Ukraine, they can open a business, they can access their driver's license, they can pay their taxes, number of government services. But it solves some pretty fundamental issues. The other thing is that when the war started and the TV towers went down, this became a lifeline. The government was able to communicate with Ukrainian citizens. It also became helpful because suddenly the government was able to crowdsource intelligence, right? You have Russian troops on your street, take a picture, geotag it, upload it. Suddenly armed forces know where Russian military is. So it's really become a lifeline for the Ukrainian people. And we're certainly proud of this partnership. And this is in partnership with Visa, Google, Eurasia Foundation, a number of other partners. And certainly the Ministry of Digital Transformation in Ukraine is leading the way on this. This is now open source. We have several other countries that are looking to partner on this and make it their own. So we're excited about that. All right. One of the things we've done in partnership with USDA, so oftentimes we partner with other government agencies through our GeoCenter. You know, oftentimes having accurate GIS data is really critical for disaster response, for a number of applications. But we've worked to empower young people through our Youth Mappers program. We have about over 3,000 college students around the world who are part of this program. Essentially, they use their smartphones to upload imagery that into an open database, OpenStreetMaps, that helps us when disasters happen reach areas that we need to reach for response. Let's go to the next one. So I think many of you guys know this. There are promises and there are perils of digital tools, and certainly in low and middle income countries, this can be challenging. Sometimes, you know, there are cybersecurity threats that we have to deal with. Sometimes there's limitations in technical capacity. These are all things that we have to tackle through our technical assistance, through our funding, through our partnerships. But we definitely feel like there is a huge opportunity here. There's an opportunity to scale technologies. And for a lot of folks in low and middle income countries, we're trying to lower the barriers for compute, for those who want to engage more on AI. A lot of feedback that we get from partner countries is that AI could be their ticket. That's where they're gonna, that's where they're gonna make it, is by betting big on AI. So we work a lot to mitigate risks by supporting digital literacy programs, and ultimately, from a policy level, really thinking about a rights-respecting governance structure around the deployment of AI. Let's go to the next slide. So I talked a little bit about cybersecurity, so we can skip this one and go to the next slide. And then I'll wrap up with our science programs, our research division. the underlying theme here is to get the capacity that we have at post-secondary institutions here in the US and in our partner countries to focus on science for development. What does that look like? That's, that's like a school like Michigan State doing drought-resistant seed research. That's deploying drones out of a Peruvian institution to help survey for forest degradation. That's pairing up Makerere University in Uganda with Kansas State to develop an app for farmers to detect crop blight using artificial intelligence, right? It's a number of things. So a few parting thoughts for you all as we wrap up today. The first is that, yeah, we talk a lot about sustainability at USAID, and that's important. But for those of you who are in the private sector, those of you who are at companies, think about embedding this work into your business model. Your engagement with an agency like USAID or perhaps others in the federal government shouldn't just be charity, right? We don't want this to just be a CSR line. We think this can be a win-win. So again, think about the sustainability here, and solving global challenges is something that we need the private sector to help us with. The second is that innovation can be a catalyst for inclusive development. And for us, that means bringing local communities along for the ride. It means bringing indigenous communities along for their expertise and their knowledge and their special relationship with the land that has a lot of insights that many of us may just have not been exposed to. And then third is the power of cross-sector collaboration. We just cannot go at this alone, and we need private sector partners who can move quickly. We need innovators who are just creative. We are all in this together and need one another. So thank you very much. I appreciate it. Sure.
All right, testing. Thank you so much.
Thank
That was a great presentation.
Thank you.
Sarah is going to walk around the room if anyone has Q&A questions. We have time for a couple. And if anyone has them, our virtual guests, just put them in the chat box, and we have someone from IdeaScale in the back that will help us out.
Thank you so much for that presentation. You mentioned that in low-income countries, AI is seen as a big opportunity. Can you talk a little bit more about that? Why is that?
A couple of reasons. One, you can do a lot with AI, right? It sort of multiplies your powers. I think of just a simple example. Yesterday, we were on a call and someone was talking about how they were able to analyze millions of lines in a spreadsheet. What normally would have taken them hours, from an operational perspective, has just saved a lot of capacity. And I think that's for any of our organizations, there's an efficiency that can come with good use of AI. Two, I think folks see the economic opportunity here around the development of AI models. But I think there's another thread in a lot of low and middle income countries that it has become very present. Is that think of where these models are developed. Right? They're developed typically in California, maybe in New York, maybe in Austin, Texas, maybe London, Dubai, places in China. How often are they developed in like Lusaka or in Cairo or Nairobi? They're not. And there's the data that goes in to train a model is reflective of the person that puts it in oftentimes. So we think a lot about bias. And I think a lot of folks in different parts of the world are saying, well, how are we reflected in the development of these models? So I think folks see a lot of opportunity in that. And they want access to be able to do that, to engage. We're working with a lot of the technology companies to try to lower the barriers for that. The cost of compute, of course, as you know, is expensive, but from a hardware and a just credits perspective. So yeah, it's a great question.
Thank you.
You're really lucky to have a great leader, Samantha Power, and I'm so glad you mentioned the journalism and writing aspect in your agency. With less than a week to go before the election, is there concern at your agency, if Trump is elected, and would he greatly reduce or hurt some of the programs that you are involved with?
It's a great question. So I'm not going to speculate about the election because I think in 2016 we learned probably not to make predictions. But I will say this: I think when we step back, we do look at the challenges in the world. Like we have to have innovative tools to approach these challenges, to reach more people, to reach them more efficiently, to stretch our dollars more from our approaches. We can't go at this alone. And that budget reality, I don't anticipate that that's going to change with any administration either way. We've got an obligation to do the work regardless of who is there. I work with, civil servants who are just committed to the mission, and whoever is at the top is, I don't want to say is irrelevant, but at the end of the day, folks are focused on the mission and doing the best innovative work, deploying the most effective tools to do the job, and making sure we've got the evidence, the scientific evidence to see through the ambiguity and help better people's lives. I'll also say that I think a lot of the work that we do is going to resonate in a bipartisan nature, right? The reality is there are threats in the world, and we do see a competitive landscape with Russia and the PRC, and that's a reality in development. So, I hope that is a sort of a mainstay, and I hope folks continue to stay the course and certainly support these programs and the efforts, not just in our unit, but across the agency. We're trying to make people's lives better, and we're trying to do it, I think, in partnership with local communities as well. Yeah, it's a tough question. Thank you.
Thanks for your presentation.
Thanks.
That the information on the DIV and the EPIC programs is fascinating. I've never actually heard of them because I'm not working in that world currently. But did you do a lot to advertise in areas after like a hurricane or a mudslide this past year? And how are you getting ideas or information to folks in areas that are impacted and maybe don't have access to technology to get their ideas as they're learning and creating things for that could apply possibly?
Yeah, that's a great question. So maybe just to clarify, so USAID's focus is primarily on low and middle income countries. So our focus is really external. So, should an entrepreneur want, or an innovator from Western North Carolina want to share an idea, great. We're an open innovation platform, but our sort of targeted focus as a foreign assistance agency is overseas. So that's how I would answer that. However, I do know that other government agencies do use the challenge.gov platform. So like FEMA, HHS, I'm sure a number of other agencies do as well. And there are opportunities for folks to engage there as well. I'll also share this though, and this is a little bit removed, so this doesn't directly answer your question, but we work with universities across the country, and we do work with researchers. And part of that is thinking about what research that may come out of a university in Uganda that is relevant to a community in the US. And we do try to share this from time to time through public fora, through our newsletters, through convenings that we host where we share information where possible. But yeah, I hope that answers your question.
Do you have folks in Nepal and in Turkey that maybe could have gotten ideas to your platform in the past year?
All over the world. It's an open innovation platform. Yeah, we have folks from all over the world. Yeah.
Thanks. Great presentation.
Thanks, Scott.
Resonates strongly. And USAID seems to be everywhere. When I was in academia doing field work, you guys were there. When I was at the World Bank, you guys were always a partner. Now that I'm in the private sector, just last week, we've signed another MOU with you guys. So I don't know what your capacity resources looks like, but incredible. A question about the public-private partnerships that you suggested. Fully agree that that is absolutely what's needed for sustainable development. I'm wondering, what are the biggest challenges you face from your end on engaging private sector players? What are the biggest challenges in getting them on board with what your mission is? Where is there sort of rife in those discussions?
That's a great question, Rami. Thank you. I think a couple of things. There's a couple of things that maybe organizationally, we have a private sector engagement hub within our bureau that tries to do air traffic control. Because I'm sure for folks at companies like Visa or wherever, Google, like they're getting hit from a lot of different bureaus. We have 12 bureaus in DC and 82 missions around the world. And a lot of companies will have local offices as well. So that coordination can sometimes be a challenge in such a big organization. So I think that's one. Two, I think a lot of companies are seeing the immense opportunity in low and middle income countries. So that's becoming an easier sell to say, hey, like this is a market for growth. Here's a huge opportunity for you. So I think that has shifted. The public sentiment around that has shifted, which is good. But I think it still can still be a challenge, right? Like everyone's got their priorities. I think where we sit as a government agency is thinking about the de-risking piece, right? Like, and I don't say this from an ITR perspective, but just in general, like for us to move in first, invest, that brings the risk down for private sector partners. I think I certainly wish we could like double or triple the budget to be able to do more of that. But it becomes a question of, I think, scarce resource for everyone. And does it make sense for the company? Because at the end of the day, companies are going to have an orientation towards their bottom line. And hopefully doing good fits into that. I'm a strong believer that it should, and you're there to serve customers. You don't want to hurt them. But, yeah, those questions of resources can be tricky ones. I think those are probably the toughest things that I would say. Yeah. But we have a great set of partners. We can't do the work that we do without our partners. And I'll also say, like, when a couple of things. When a company like Google lays down fiber optic cable around Liberia, like that's not just Google making money, that's also development, right? That's more people with access. That's more people who are learning, who are accessing healthcare, more people who are doing business online. When, a new translation variant comes out and you can translate, like Wolof or Swahili, and it's not just English, Spanish, and French to English, right? When you get some of these languages that aren't spoken very widely, that gives people access to all of the things on the internet. That's also development, right? It just looks a little bit different. So just to say, I think I'm excited to see more companies leaning into the space and trying to figure it out with us. Yeah. Great question. Thanks.
Just popping in here. That's actually the end of our Q&A segment. Thank you so much. That was an excellent presentation.
Appreciate it. Thank you, guys.
I will bring back up Tim Sussman to introduce our next speaker.
Thank you, Mohammed. Oh, our next speaker today, I'd like to invite up to the podium Clifford Young, President of Polling and Societal Trends at Ipsos.
Oh, that guy. I'm actually wearing the exact same. Boy, that's embarrassing, right? I should have known that was a picture. So I'm not 100% sure how the technology up here works. Do I have control of this?
It doesn't work.
Okay, I'm not. I might have to step aside. So my name's Cliff Young, and I'm president at Ipsos. Ipsos is a market and social research company. It's the third largest in the world. We have coverage of 90 countries or boots on the ground in 90 countries, and we cover about 130. We work with a whole bunch of clients in the United States, private sector, public sector, including the federal government, as well as the third sector. And I am a professional pollster, but I will not say what's going to happen because I know, but I won't say. No, truly, it's one of those things. And if you want to talk about it in more detail, we can do it over drinks after the session. But I will make some references to the elections. And so what I wanted to do, and this is a session about innovation, about facilitated innovation on the public sector side. And I wanted to step back a bit and take a 30,000-foot view and look at it from a slightly different perspective. And not just sort of in a macro way, in an abstract way, conceptual way that's not very useful. I want to give you some takeaways to sort of help you think about how to facilitate more efficient innovation. And indeed, as I see it and based upon the basic science, innovation requires collaboration, interaction, and intense interaction, trustful interaction among humans. And the question is, how do you facilitate that in a world that is less than trustful, right? And so what I'll do is I'm going to step back a bit because I have to, because I'm a pollster. We're going to look at some big macro trends. Then I want to go sort of, if I don't go into sort of the subatomic sort of realm, I want to talk a little bit about the cognitive science, the brain science, so we can glean something about how we process information as humans to help us build trust looking forward. And so the last section will be like 3 takeaways to help you go back and make sure your innovation programs are optimally trust-ridden in a good way. So the next slide, let's see. It's this side. Is that you? You got it. You got it. There we go. Next slide. That's actually the first slide. The next slide. And so social trends. I think I'm going to step out. I think it's going to be easier for me as I wanted to innovate, but I couldn't innovate. I wanted to be different than the last speaker, but the last speaker innovated the right way. But just 2 big, broad social trends I want to talk about, which, by the way, we hear in the campaigns today. I don't want to say too much about that. This is not the place. The first one, next slide, is basically a widespread belief that the system is broken. It doesn't matter how you measure it. You can measure it. Yeah. Do you trust other people? We don't have that here. Do you believe the system is broken? Is how we often look at it on my side of the fence. Is the establishment something you can trust, right? Do you believe in parties and politicians anymore? Is the system rigged? By the way, we hear this over and over again. Don't we hear this year here in the United States? We also know at Ipsos, this is a global phenomenon. So there's moment we live in of widespread systemic distrust. I don't trust other people. You don't trust me. We know, obviously, the negative outcomes from that, difficulties of coming to consensus, difficulties with governance, ultimately, and a problem with trust, which is ultimately, as I didn't already emphasize, is they're sort of, as I see it, the glue or the stem cells of any social group, not just society, but any social group, including a group of innovators, collaborators, whether it be internal to the agency or external to the agency, that are coming together to talk through issues. The other trend, next slide, the other trend is just increased polarization. And this is just an index that we developed at Ipsos. And it's nothing more than taking a whole bunch of issues, looking at the partisan differences and plotting it over time. And I want to emphasize this because this undermines trust as well. This has a systemic impact, not just on politics, but how we engage at all with other human beings. By the way, the Young family, half of it's Brazilian, half of it's American. We don't usually get in any sort of conflict because our sports aren't the same, right? So we can root for the national teams of both. But ultimately, we don't talk red or blue at the Thanksgiving dinner. We don't talk red or green at the Christmas dinner in Brazil. These are sorts of things we don't talk about because they're extremely polarizing and they undermine trust both systemically and also in terms of group interaction. So the point I want to make is we have these forces today that are not helping us do business. They're making transaction costs greater, right? And ultimately, the question is, how can you facilitate that? How can you improve trust? How can you be more credible? I'll use that word a lot because that's a word I use a lot with clients, private sector, public sector, third sector, being credible relative to your audience. Credibility exercised over time builds trust. We know that scientifically speaking. How do you do that? In order to think about it, let's go to the next slide. We're going to have to think a bit about, I have the negative outcomes here. We've talked about that. Next slide, please. A bit about the brain. I don't know if the brain is blue. I don't think it's quite blue, but it is here. But understanding what's going on as we process information, a lot of the work we've done at Ipsos is not the basic science. We just take the basic science and kind of synthesize it. But we synthesize it to help our clients do exactly what I was just saying. How do you engage in a way that's trustful and trustworthy, right? And there's a couple critical points I want to make here. The first point is that we typically, when we evaluate something, we sort of look at like what's important to us and how well that thing performs on that thing we think is important. Man, that's really, really abstract, right? What the heck is Cliff talking about? I'll take it back to politics. What's the number one issue today in the United States? Inflation. Who's strongest on inflation? Well, the candidate strongest on inflation probably has a better evaluation than the candidate that's weaker on inflation. And this sort of way of processing information by rankings and ratings is replete in all sort of domains. We see it across the board. This is how humans ultimately process information. And I'll come back to that in a second when I talk about practical takeaways. The next slide, please. The next point is it's an issue of packaging of information. How is that information shown? Does it have a blue tint or a red tint or a purple tint or a green tint, whatever it might be? How is it shown? How is it delivered? Will have a lot to do with whether that information is actually even processed by the person. The question is, I not only have to think about what's really important for people, I know that based upon the cognitive science, that's what gets people out of bed and going in the morning, but I also have to think about how I package the way I deliver information to people, how I talk to people, how I engage people, right? And here I have, I use the analogy of the clown and the woman. I often use this in a class I teach at Johns Hopkins, but basically think of it like this. I'm walking down the street, I'm on Massachusetts, but down a ways where the old Johns Hopkins was, that way, I guess, that way. And I hear a scream. That scream calls my attention. If I turn and I see a clown screaming, I'm gonna actually run, because that's not that. Yeah, I mean, a screaming clown in the middle of DC on Madison Avenue. I'm not quite sure, but the point being, that information is not credible to me, right? That's actually scary. There might be a threat there. The same me walking down Mass Ave again. I hear a scream, and I look over and I see a woman bleeding. So what am I going to do? How am I going to react? I'm going to go, oh, she needs help. I might run towards her. I might take out my cell phone and call 911. That information, the same scream, it sounded the same, was packaged in very, very different ways. It had very, very different meanings. Okay? Ultimately, information that's not credible, I discard, I get rid of. Information that's credible, I more fully reflect on, I embed that in my decision making. Okay? So what's the rank order of my needs or wants given a specific domain? What do I want? And two, understanding that the packaging of information has a differential effect as to whether I will process that information more or not. Next slide. Okay. And here, you could just go click it because it's yeah, there we go. So here, it's just like the packaging of information is about words, words, words. It's how we put stuff together. That's what it ultimately is, right? Understanding what's the number one issue for people, what they really want, is one sort of task. The other one is understanding, and I'll talk about this at the end, understanding the word landscape of the given domain, of a given innovation exercise, of a given agency, of the constituencies of a given agency, as an example. Next slide. And here, ultimately, the question is, understanding this, can we build trust? More specifically, can we build credibility in a trustless world? And next slide. And I have basically three kind of takeaways from this that we emphasize a lot with our clients, whether our clients are out there wanting to communicate. We don't work with parties or politicians, but a party or politician could communicate. Companies can communicate, agencies can, organizations can communicate with their constituency groups. So what are the three to establish trust, to reinforce trust, to build it over time? The next slide. The first one, there's a lot of data here, but I just want to say this is what I'm tracking day by day, what's going on with the elections. The number one issue is the economy. The number one issue is inflation. And we won't go into specifics as to who is stronger and who is weaker on this specific issue. But this is an example of ultimately people's rank ordering. And I just put up here, just on the title, meet people where they are. This goes for your collaborators. Like, what do they want to get out of that collaboration? Are the desires of the demands of the collaborators the same internally or externally? Do you know that? I'm not saying you even need to do research. You can just engage and talk at times, right? Is that me? That's my cell phone? Okay, there we go. So in any case, collaborators. And I also put the 85% rule. What do we know by that? Just to reinforce the importance of meeting people where they are, meaning meeting their most important needs, understanding those needs, listening to them. The 85% rule is the candidate strongest on the main issue wins 85% of the time. It's just a proxy. It's a proxy for the importance of meeting people where they are, ultimately, right? When you think about innovation, are these innovations meeting citizen demands or desires? Are they? Innovation for innovation's sake probably won't be as impactful and effective in the long term relative to one that is aligned with what people want. So meet people where they are. Lots of basic science shows that doing that reinforces trust with constituency groups. It's just that you have to understand that, and most importantly, listen in one way or another. You could do it through research in a more sophisticated way. You could do it in a more informal way by listening to your key constituencies. Next one. We've already talked about the issue of words, and I put here, know the words of your craft. Do you know the words of your craft? If you're managing a brand, do you know the words of your specific target area? If you're running an agency or a department in an agency, do you know the words of your constituency groups? And here I'm not talking necessarily formally, but informally, are you taking down notes? I always do it, by the way. I always pay attention to these sorts of things. Because again, I am especially worried about how I package information, because I want information to be optimally impactful, right? Are we promising collaborators, things that actually they desire and they want? Is the value proposition interesting to them, as an example? Are we using words that we shouldn't? It's less of an issue, obviously, in politics and in business. We don't talk politics often, obviously. But do you understand the word landscape of your constituency groups? Here I just have an interesting experiment just showing the differential effect of associating words with support for an infrastructure bill. It's just a proof point. Just wanted to show that depending on how you frame the word salad relative to a given issue, people will be more or less likely to process that information, or more or less likely to discard it. Look at economists and experts. Republicans, Democrats can get behind them equally. And lastly, the third point. Next. The third point is basically walking the walk, not just talking the talk. And I have a couple things going on this slide because I think they're very, very interesting. It's something we've shared a lot. We've taken, on the right, we took maybe 400 different people, places, and things and took the averages. And we see that brands are much more favorable, let's say, than politics, government, and news organizations. We have personalities kind of in the middle. And the point I wanted to make here is your brand proposition, your value proposition, and delivering on it consistently over time is super important. Governments have a lot bigger challenge because they have to deal, they have a responsibility, they have as a mandate to ultimately deal with multiple constituencies, a population of citizens, for the sake of argument. Brands, on the flip side, can be very niche. Their value proposition can be very specific. It's an interesting case study to show that they're more able to walk the walk and talk the talk because of their unique nature, the sort of sector that they're in, and their ability to be specific focused and niche oriented, as I already said. But emphasizing once again, thinking about this, the ability that you know, your ability to understand this, understanding you know, whatever you set out with your key constituency groups, it's important that you ultimately deliver on what you promised. The other side is actually Tom Hanks, but it could be Taylor Swift as well. And the point is, both of these figures stepped into politics, and we can see their favorability scores declining. And once again, it's not about the politics in and of itself. It's about the fact that they didn't walk the walk and talk the talk. They weren't faithful to their own brand proposition, and they ultimately got clobbered. I only have Hanks here, but obviously he got involved in a lot of the discussions about COVID. We won't go into the merits, the values of that judgment on that, but ultimately he was in the inability to walk and talk the talk. Last slide. And so kind of bring it all together. Broad-based problems with trust, systemic distrust, as we said, lots of social changes. Social change just reinforces that. It makes the word environment complicated in a larger sense. We understand things from cognitive science, especially the packaging of words is critical for further, more deep elaboration, reflection to get people to do stuff. Or if you have the wrong word configuration, people discard it. And the three ways we often talk with our clients about how you can go about improving trust with your constituencies. One, meeting people where they are, right? That's super important. We often forget that. You don't have to do research with Ipsos to understand that. You can go out and just talk with them. At least think about it conceptually. The second is understanding the words of your craft. Is there a problematic distribution or landscape of words? Maybe there isn't in what you do, but at least have a notion and understanding of that. At the very least, the broad political words, which I believe probably all of you try to stay away from, are problematic. And lastly, it's about walking the walk and talking the talk. Making promises that you can't deliver are basically the death knell of any sort of trust. And so with that, thank you.
This panel will transition us from the social innovation we heard earlier and the social trends and messaging to crowdsourcing as a strategy for innovation and even for research, strategic research, and all how that also helps to facilitate improved modernization in government and collaboration. So to begin, I'm joined by Dr. Vicki Whitmore. She oversees a grant portfolio that includes basic, translational, and clinical studies on epilepsy. These include grants on sudden, unexpected death in epilepsy and seizure localization studies. She also oversees a grant portfolio on myalgic chronic fatigue syndrome and fatigue. She is interested in research on global health issues, stigma, and comorbidities. Great. Those are some large words in that bio. We also are grateful to be joined by Dina Lambert. She is the diversity lead, diversity, equity, and inclusion manager at NASA. Dina leads a strategic effort that ensures NASA's early stage innovations and partnerships portfolio of over 700 funding opportunities incorporates sound DEIA practices and strategies. She works to ensure the funding, usually raised through crowdsourcing and prize competitions, is dispersed without bias and is fair. Lastly, we're joined by Commander Laura Springer, Innovation Manager, Office of Research Development, Test and Evaluation, Innovation at the United States Coast Guard. She brings great experience from the military industry, specifically government, operational planning, risk assessment, leadership, and data analysis. She leads the United States Coast Guard's Ideas at Work program. So thank you for joining us. I'm hoping we could have a little bit of discussion. I've teed up some questions, and then if time permits, some of our audience can also ask a few questions. Okay, so to kick us off, what exactly are we talking about around crowdsourced innovation and crowdsourcing innovation programs? So Vicky, can you lead us off by describing a little bit of your program and how it's used to advance research and collaboration?
Sure. Thank you for the question. So at NIH, the traditional way to get feedback from the community was to publish a request for information through the Federal Register. What happens then, that goes out. You maybe get a few, depending on what the question is, you get some responses, but it's not a conversation. It's not a discussion. And so I was in charge of organizing a very large epilepsy conference that was meant to discuss and revise epilepsy research benchmarks. So we had a committee that developed the benchmarks. We wanted to put those out to the community and said, we're not doing an RFI. We're doing something innovative. And I've heard about IdeaScale and said, this is what we want to do. We want to put this out there, have it be a discussion where the community can have feedback they can discuss with one another. And that was the first campaign we did actually from NINDS. We brought IdeaScale in to specifically for that campaign. And then I more recently did an even much larger campaign around research priorities for chronic fatigue syndrome. So we use it as a way to both get feedback, but also have a community discussion.
Great, thank you. Dina, can you describe NASA's innovation program briefly and how you incorporate crowdsourcing and DIA practices?
Sure. So I'm specifically with the Space Technology Mission Directorate, and what our job is to do technological investment in the capabilities that we want to enable our missions in the future, 5, 10, 20 years down the line. And we do that through grants, contracts. But the really awesome area that we can use innovative ideas is through crowdsourcing, prizes, and challenges. So we do it internally within our NASA workforce. At one point we called it NASA at Work. Now it's NASA Spark. But we also use it externally through our NASA Tournament Lab, where we have vendors that can help facilitate our prizes and challenges. And we can design it to be as simple as, hey, can you code an algorithm for us that'll help with image processing, to hey, do you have solutions for bringing in new talent? So it can take a lot of different shape, both internally and externally. It can also go from low dollar value to actually something more significant and lead on to efforts that you see in the form of grants or contracts later on. So.
Thank you. Laura, what about the U.S. Coast Guard?
Hi. So the Coast Guard is an organization of about 40,000 people, which they're actually more New York City policemen and firefighters than there are members of the Coast Guard. So we have 11 statutory missions, which range from search and rescue to aids to navigation. So we are doing a lot of different things. We have people operating in the Arctic. We have ships in the Antarctic. So what we've really used the tool is to engage the workforce. Our foundational belief is that every coastie is an innovator. So the platform gives everyone from the non-rate working in Coos Bay the voice to bring it to the attention that senior leadership that he or she doesn't have a driver's license. How am I going to get a driver's license if I'm not allowed to drive a government vehicle? So we really use the platform to engage all levels of the workforce. Right now we have a lot of focused challenges, but we always keep it open. And our open idea forum has gotten a lot of really neat things that we think kind of really improve the overall health of the workforce. For example, last year we added 40 religions to our human resources system. Mm-hmm. So we really rely on the crowdsourcing to give us what we're not seeing. Our headquarters building is located in Anacostia. And we don't know what's going on in the field. So it really is a tool for us to engage with all levels of the organization. Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Wow. So a takeaway is government is doing amazing work already. Internal problem solving that may result in grants internal problem solving that strengthens an entire workforce to deliver its key services to protect our coasts, and then also external crowdsourcing around strategic medical health research, all being done. So my next question is, that's a lot of ideas, a lot of submissions, a lot of maybe some bad ideas in there too. How do you briefly, describe your process, and also how do you take those ideas and actually translate them into something that's valuable, particularly financially valuable, but not necessarily? Vicky?
So it's a challenge, especially with the second campaign I did, we had hundreds of ideas. And trying to synthesize all of that into really what was important was really a challenge. But from that, what we developed was a research roadmap that's helping to guide our research priorities and help the community to understand these are the priorities that NIH is interested in supporting. So there's a lot of interesting science that could be done, but what the whole emphasis of the thing our program is what do we need to do and what do we need to know to get to clinical trials. So that was really the focus, and really we had amazing feedback from especially individuals who are affected with chronic fatigue syndrome, who really provided amazing feedback. But I was telling Sarah, it's a real challenge right now because we delivered the roadmap program and report to our council in May. And now the community is saying, okay, where's the dollars? Where's the research? What's coming next? And in the current budget climate, it's really challenging.
Sounds challenging. And it sounds like you're not starting at zero. You're having a research like hypothesis, and you're getting the crowd to also like build consensus around the areas that make the most sense. And that in and of itself is a value
That's correct.
that our mission is aligned with what external experts think is the most valuable things that we need to do.
And what most importantly, what the people with the disease need and think is most important.
Awesome. So the end user, almost, to use a different term. Fantastic. Dina, so it ends with grants. So before you invest into these ideas, you need to have some kind of like some numbers on what makes sense. So what's feasible, desirable, viable. How do you guys go about it?
So we actually use our prizes, challenges, crowdsourcing platform as kind of like a scouting of, hey, what's out there, what's happening. It's shifting from just an RFI, kind of thing where it's a one-way conversation. We can use kind of the prizes platform so that we can have more of a conversation, a dialogue. We can use webinars to kind of spark that excitement. We use our vendors to get the word out, and also the various communities out there who are able to kind of see, are there startups, are there individuals? Because that's the great thing about, let's say, the underpinning of crowdsourcing is having the Competes Act that gives you that authority to utilize the public, small entities, individuals, academia, industry. And then what we've been doing is utilizing both our workforce for those that want to participate as reviewers and evaluators of those ideas, but we also want to value the time of volunteers out in the public by offering an honorarium so that they get a chance to be a part of either voting or looking at what ideas are really credible. And you can set up a prize to have multiple stage gates, so then you can funnel the ideas upward so that you come in, let's say, with a couple of hundred ideas. You can narrow it down to 50. You can host a voting platform so that you get the top winners.
Thank you. Laura?
So we kind of use it two separate ways. We use it to actually help us develop our research portfolio. We allow everyone in the Coast Guard, if they have a problem, to submit it, and then we senior leaders vote using strategy and guidance to see if this is something that should be pursued. But on the Open Idea Forum, what we do is we look to find sponsors to see if they're interested in transitioning the idea. The bulk of ideas do not get transitioned, but we push them out there and we look for people who are interested in transitioning these ideas. And the other way that we use it that's we found very valuable is in hurricane seasons that are predicted to be particularly severe. We open a challenge at the beginning of the year, and then we learn what other units that are doing that is successful. For example, in Hurricane Harvey, we had one of our most successful challenges, and other units were able to go on and see that people were using text messaging or social media to find people. And then finally, we also use it to just figure out what programs need. If a program comes to us, for example, our most commented on challenge was we did a recruiting challenge which had over 1,600 votes and comments when the Coast Guard was struggling to meet our recruiting needs. And we have since met the recruiting needs and we have closed the challenge down. So.
Thank you. Do you have a question for?
I mean, that is pretty awesome and how broad of a requirement that you guys set within that prize to meet your recruiting goals? Did you mirror what your standard requirement is, or how did you kind of funnel in, and what was
So we really just funneled our ideas to the people who had money and funding, and they implemented them.
Thank you. I guess one follow-up question that I have is, taking so many ideas, getting towards the consensus, or getting to the point where you could do the honorariums or grants, getting to the point where you could decide these ideas are going to stay, these are the ones that are actually going to become projects. The software enables voting, commenting, assessing. Do you also or can you describe how you use maybe advisory boards or other key groups of subject matter experts to kind of review a smaller subset of all of the ideas or applications or research submissions? Go ahead.
Sure, I'll start. So I read most of them. And sometimes I filter things to the innovation knowledge base. I really try not to, because of that founding belief that we believe that every COSI is an innovator, and we really believe that everything that people took the time out of their day to submit something and they want to improve the organization. But what we do is as an innovation program, we read them. There are some actually the crowd answers. They'll have a question. One that comes to mind was the Navy gets a maternity uniform allowance. And somebody asked, why doesn't the Coast Guard? And then somebody links the policy. So we spend a lot of time reading, and then every program has a designated representative that we send the idea to.
Great. Dina or Vicky, do you want to try?
So I know for a prize that I just ran this past year, which was the Space Tech Catalyst Prize, it was meant to find out who were these smaller innovators that were out there in the local communities that were not coming up in our kind of proposer pipeline. And so we wanted to identify organizations that were out there doing it. So I used a mix of internal workforce. I did a workforce Spark challenge to find out who wanted to serve as judges or evaluators and what expertise they brought, and also externally from, let's say, DoD or industry, just so that we had a good perspective, because we were looking for proposers that could come across a lot of different tech capability areas. And so it was actually pretty nice. I, as the prize owner, took the feedback from our reviewers as their ranking and rating, so that I could have a little bit of distance from kind of the outcome. But it was a great experience to have someone from our prize community kind of shepherd me as a prize owner through the process and let me know kind of what are some of the best practices when you get to crowdsourcing. And that was really helpful. But I know that takes kind of protecting and strengthening the kind of prize infrastructure or crowdsourcing infrastructure, that if you're going to do innovation, you have to protect and create that wedge for it to happen.
Yeah, so our standard practice at NIH is for any kind of strategic planning process we do, we put a working group in place that includes clinicians, researchers, individuals with the disease, people with lived experience, and their caregivers. So when we do a crowdsourcing campaign, for the campaigns, I read every one of those and summarized them because we got to the end and realized I wasn't allowed at NIH to use any kind of AI tool. So many sleepless nights summarizing everything. But then all of that went back to that advisory committee that then reviewed all of that input and where there was one response or where there were 100 responses to really understand the pulse of the community and what we were hearing.
Great. Let me switch up a little bit. I know we're covering large government crowdsourced innovation and research programs, so it's very wide. And now I'm going to kind of go to just like, if you could wave a magic wand, given all of these stakeholders, all of these ideas, what improvements with your community, your leaders, or your process will greatly strengthen the outcomes of your program? Magic wand. Laura?
So mine is a little unique. I would every decision maker in Coast Guard headquarters, I would give them a virtual reality headset and then put them in the scenario that is being described. You said I had a magic wand, so and then I would just have them walk a mile in someone's shoes and see, hey, maybe I can do something about this. Because a lot of the best innovations are small innovations that make the workforce happier. For example, this braid in my hair was not authorized 4 years ago. So I think just making sure that the decision makers understand why people are taking time out of their busy day to try to make their organization better.
That's amazing. I'm thinking Apple Vision Pro can help even empathize, to your point, but also start to prototype it with the end users. Vicky or Dina?
I think I would probably, along with having the decision makers, really kind of spend some time with, let's say, the crowdsourcing, the solver community, because that's where you get to the stories of impact of what does it mean. You know, how many hours of time does it save because you came to an idea through crowdsourcing that you otherwise wouldn't have been able to come up with because you're stuck in a lab somewhere. I think sometimes within government, we choose ideas based on who is in the closest proximity to either the decision maker or the resources officer who has the purse strings for your PPPE, process. I think with crowdsourcing, if you're able to get to the essence of telling a story and the impact and giving the workforce the ability to engage in that, you'll probably get richer solutions, or at least get to the heart of what problems are they sitting with that they need help with, that either procurement or contracting is putting too much of a box, on them. And I think that's where prizes and the crowdsourcing platform can lower a barrier to entry that we've seen. So let's say we have a program called Flight Opportunities, and before we were using grants and contracts for that type of funding area. And what we found is that we only saw large businesses with components that are churning out proposals over and over again. But when we shifted to either crowdsourcing or challenge platform, we saw ideas coming from graduate students, universities that are just starting out into the flight ops area. And that's where we were seeing riskier ideas, but ones that as an agency, we can take on that risk a little bit more, especially for those early stage concepts. But what I'd love to see ultimately is us telling those stories of impact so that it kind of piques that interest to come back and use it more.
Yeah, for me, it's interesting because our leadership, at least at the institute I work at, has absolutely embraced getting the external feedback. What we haven't done as much, I mean, it's so interesting hearing these two speak, is we really haven't used it to get internal feedback. And I would love to see it implemented. There's so many times when there's an email that goes out or something on Teams and there's, some back and forth, but to have it all IdeaScale saying, what's your idea around this? Or just an open idea platform would be fantastic to really implement that as a way to hear internally what people are thinking and to get that feedback. That would be,
Yeah.
that
And
is what I wish.
I know internally for us, for our crowdsourcing effort, our group sets aside some funding. So, if a prize owner or challenge owner doesn't have funding for themselves, because that's the barrier for a lot of folks, they have problems, but they may not have the funding to help solve it, or at least to go search out the ideas to solve it. So that's where we do keep a funding set aside, where we do a call out, annually to say, hey, we're soliciting problems that you need help solving, and we'll help you frame out the size and scope of that. So then it does spur that on so that you can get that internal engagement. So
Thank you. So without leading the witness here, do you see any trends emerging that might affect how you engage your communities going forward? Anyone, Vicky?
So yes, the two campaigns I did were 4 years apart, and it was really, they were significantly different in that the communities were different, in that the second community, many of the individuals are housebound, bedbound, they live on their computers. And so it was like natural for them to do this crowdsourcing. They loved it. The epilepsy community, not so much. And people had really struggled with using the platform. Part of it was that we were new to it as well. But I think there was just such a difference in the ability of the people to be able to use it as a way to provide the feedback. And I think that's what we're seeing in some of the other campaigns that our institute has done.
Got it. So it really back to like meeting your end users where they're at. It's like literally, is this the
Absolutely.
best tool and even message to outreach to them? Dina?
um I know, like someone said earlier, that AI is everywhere. I think the challenge that we have in government is that we are much slower to either accept it, embrace it, use it, or encourage it. And I think if I could have a magic wand, that somehow we could bridge that gap, because I think outside in society, they are ready. They are using it in really fascinating ways to either generate idea or give them the bandwidth back so they can come up with those really crisp ideas. But sometimes the blockage for us is that we'll say, no, you cannot use AI as part of either your proposal or idea. And I think that's an artificial barrier that we've got to do something with, because outside they're ready. So, not to say we can't have some safeguards, but I think we've got to figure it out. I think we're getting there more recently within the last year, but knowing the acceleration of technology and how people adopt it and accept it, we've got to kind of move forward on it.
I have to agree. I think the AI implementation and allowing the workforce to use it effectively without having to fill out forms, get permission from the CIO, get permission from their supervisor, take an online training. I just have to reiterate that how we implement AI is going to have a huge impact on crowdsourcing and innovation.
So it's like the trend is right there, but there's so much barriers or needs that you have to go through just to be able to access what's right there in front of you. Yeah, on the idea scale side, similar to AI in our personal lives, helping us write letters or emails quicker, AI on the front end could help formulate initial idea concepts into full-fledged out idea submissions. And then the other side of that trade-off is, well, then that might be like a large submission and nobody has time to read all of that too, because you can generate so much content. Right?
We actually had someone who was using AI to comment on things, and there was a lot of reading involved.
Great. I think we have some time for some questions from the audience, but before I do, as we wrap up and invite our participants to ask some questions, what would you say to some of our participants who might be inspired to lead a crowdsourced innovation program, research initiative, but they may be a little hesitant to do so? Parting thoughts, Vicky?
know your community, know who you are seeking feedback from is critical. And I think what we learned is to really pilot it, to make sure that the campaign you're putting out there is meeting the needs and is going to get the kind of responses that you're looking for.
Know your community. Are you asking the right questions to the crowd?
Right.
Yeah. Dina?
And I think possibly just taking those small iterative steps. I think I don't want to say setting expectations low, but you've got to start somewhere. So you can start out with an internal workforce, challenge. It may not cost anything to actually do it, but just start out really small, whether you do it for branch or division or directorate. You've got to start somewhere. You don't have to have this scaled kind of massive program, but it can get there. You just have to start out small and then do it with a spirit of learning. That, let's say your first challenge or prize doesn't work, that's okay. That's the spirit of learning.
Great feedback. Why go out to the larger world when you could just start with your own employee base and your own organizations and build confidence there, and then reach out? Laura?
We really believe that none of us is as smart as all of us. So it's kind of trusting your crowd and being willing to listen to the crazy idea to get that diamond.
Fantastic. Audience, participants, any questions? Yes.
So thank you very much for your sharing. It's interesting to hear some of the ways that you're doing campaigns. One of the questions I wanted to raise was, as you do the campaigns and when you do reach the point of making decisions of which ones are accepted and acted on, is there a way that you capture and track the ideas that have been given in the past, and if those are relevant to future situations that come up that those ideas may map to? Do you use that methodology, or is that strategy active in any of your processes there?
I do know that our prize community is starting to set up a community of practice for those that are prize owners, campaign owners, so that we can learn from each other. I think the results come back to the prize owner to say, hey, the ideas that were generated, here they are. That's where I may be stepping out of my own lane of knowledge, because I don't know that information is shared. Maybe it is, but I think that is why we're starting up that community of practice, so that it is shared, that it is captured, that you do have this knowledge or wealth of knowledge that you're collecting, that it can be either adapted or applied, or say, hey, we've done it before. What tweaks can we make for the next challenge to make it even better?
Yeah, I would say the same. I think in terms of the research priorities that we have in our campaigns, they end up in a report. And so it's not a report that then sits on a shelf. It's a living document that we go back to and say, okay, we're now tackling the first 3. How can we tackle the next 5? And in terms of the sort of the community of practice, I can't tell you how many different groups within my institute and other institutes at NIH I've already talked to about doing a campaign, things to think about. I now have a slide set that I share with people about, just sort of lessons learned in terms of some of the mistakes we made and how to do things in a better way.
We really rely on the software actually links ideas. So if there's a previous idea that is similar, we use that feature, and then we also use keywords a lot.
Great.
Yep.
It's interesting to hear the chronic fatigue syndrome, which almost seems to be in the shadow of Alzheimer's and Parkinson's in your institute. And I just wonder how important it is to have, say, a celebrity like Michael J. Fox or someone else from a private, from outside the government, influence the research priorities in your institute or any of the other 30 NIH institutes? There's so many.
That's a good question. I think that certainly having a celebrity increases awareness and fundraising and advocacy. That's very clear. Do they play an outside role in developing research priorities? I don't think so. Other than, so the Michael J. Fox Foundation, for example, raises a lot of money and partners with NIH and with NINDS to come up with research priorities, make sure that things aren't overlapping, we're not doing similar funding. But I'm not sure that they have a outside influence necessarily over what we do and the decisions we make.
Never hear about chronic, or we rarely hear about chronic fatigue syndrome these days.
No, it's absolutely true. It's kind of a hidden disease. Absolutely.
I mean, and I think the question is like, do we have powerful messengers that can kind of help us like, get the word out more in an effective way and galvanize participation from a community that might not do so?
I think that's where really utilizing the vendors that we work with, whether it's IdeaScale or another vendor under our NTL, NASA Tournament Lab, because I think they have that ability to engage those kind of trusted messengers or champions, but also our comms department that can help kind of curate that messaging. I think that's where, for us, I think that's where that flexibility comes from to have folks that are out there that can garner that kind of excitement and attraction to the idea or the campaign that we're hosting.
Yep. Did you? Nope. Okay. Well, then in that case, please help me thank our wise and generous panelists.
Thank you for that moment of grace. And I am here with Dean Chang, CIO of University of Maryland.
Hi, everyone. So lots of really interesting things. Tim started the day asking what our barrier moments were. Mohammed shared some of the amazing solutions and impact at USAID. You also heard some similar stories from Vicky, Dina, Laura, and Rico. Laura even shared how they try to think of everyone as an innovator. So I'm really thrilled to kind of wrap things up by kind of filling in, how do you go from Tim's barrier moment to those innovative solutions that you've heard about? How do you help unleash the innovator inside every one of us? And with all the hype around innovation, what does it actually mean? What does it look like in practice? So in this session, you're going to try out some simple and fun activities, I hope they're fun, that you can use to engage more people in your innovation process to tackle your organization's biggest challenges. So first of all, my name is Dean. That's not my title. I like to joke that I was appointed dean by my mother. It's a lifetime appointment. And I did make that very same joke in 2016 when I was testifying in front of the House Subcommittee on Space Science and Technology. So I was just very happy that my corny dad joke is now somewhere in the congressional record. It also gives you a little bit of a window into my quirky personality. I was just kind of the jokester in the group. And then just a quick thing, random things, non-work things. Actually, this affects work. I'm a big procrastinator. I like dad jokes, audiobooks, RVs. If you're interested in doing RV camping, find me afterwards at the happy hour. I'm a huge, huge fan of RV. 7 different RV trips in 3 different countries. So, okay. So as Chief Innovation Officer, this is just some boring stuff, but basically I lead our innovation ecosystem. But along the lines of what we're talking about, we have this aspirational goal of turning all 40,000 of our students and our 15,000 faculty staff into innovators. And we want to launch ventures, which doesn't have to be a startup. In fact, in the majority of cases, it's not a startup, but launch ventures to really tackle grand challenges. So it's actually written in our strategic plan. I'm sure some of your organizations also have in your strategic plan. Who reads your strategic plan? Tough question, but for us, what's meaningful to me is that we have 12 goals in our strategic plan, and specifically innovation is one of those 12. So what has that done? This is a little bit of a gratuitous brag section about University of Maryland as well. So for 2024, Princeton Review and Entrepreneur Magazine ranked University of Maryland a #5 school in the country for entrepreneurship. I know we have some fellow Terps here. Yeah, woo, woo. Nice. And so pretty awesome. First time in our top 5, but just to give you a sense of the trajectory, in 2011, University of Maryland was unranked in entrepreneurship. 2012, we broke into the top 25 for the first time. We stayed there for 5 straight years. And then 2016, we broke into the top 10. We're very excited about that. And then we've been in the top 10 for 9 straight years. And then in 2024, ascended to the top 5, which is really cool. And this is part of my narrative, but also just to continue to brag a little bit. So our president wanted to celebrate reaching the top 5. So if any of you flew through BWI Airport from mid-December to mid-March earlier this year, you might have seen this in the baggage claim, and it really celebrates the top 5 ranking in entrepreneurship. It says University of Maryland, where startups fly. And in this particular picture, you can see Kava, one of the co-founders, Brett Schulman, a Terp out of the business school. And it wasn't just one baggage claim, it was all of them. Here you can see Epic software featured. If you don't know Epic software, they make Fortnite. Many of you may be familiar with Fortnite. Tim Sweeney was a graduate out of the engineering school. And amongst the rotation on that screen, and went through other companies started by Terps, Google, SiriusXM, IonQ, Beyond Meat, just all companies started by Terps. So very fun. But there's a reason I wanted to show this, not just to gratuitously brag about University of Maryland. It's to highlight this particular marketing campaign was only about starting companies, and that's just a fraction of what we're talking about when we talk about innovation. So actually, what I wanted to share, and hopefully this video will work in a moment, but I think, in my estimation, the most celebrated UMD innovator is not any of those that I featured, but it's Jane and Jim Henson. And Jane and Jim Henson were the co-creators of the Muppets. I'm sure a lot of people know that Jim Henson's involved, but it was actually his first girlfriend, later wife, Jane, who was a co-creator. It's a team sport. Innovation is a team sport, and I'm going to say more about that in a moment. But actually, I'm going to see if this video works. So hopefully, go to the next slide, and I'm going to play. If I click it, do you want me to click it? Or there you go. So 30 seconds of this. Oh, do we have sound? All right. If sound is not working, wait, can we restart? Because I was prepared for this. I have my Bluetooth speaker here, and I'll do a countdown 3, 2, 1 if we start at the same time. I'm hoping that this will actually work. Okay, 3, 2, 1. Close enough.
This was an experiment. No one had ever seen anything like it.
I wanted to capture the family aura. Hi, Bert.
But I don't think any of us sat there thinking, oh my God, we're changing the world.
Joan had a brilliantly simple notion. Children were watching a tremendous amount of television.
So why not see if it could educate them?
I love the whole idea of taking commercial techniques and applying them to a show for kids.
I was convinced that it would be impossible to do.
Jim Henson, Frank Oz, if they were on, you had a good day. We're the best of friends.
Yeah. How many lines do you have? Three. Well, try to get the first one better.
All right, you can pause there. So give me a sec of a slide. So first of all, this is a fantastic documentary. If you haven't seen it, it's called The Street Gang, How We Got to Sesame Street. It's on streaming on HBO Max. There's also a new documentary by Ron Howard, Jim Henson Idea Man, that just came out a couple months ago. Also fantastic. I love that one even more because it gets into Jane Henson's role. Again, it's a team sport, lesser known that Jane was just every bit as innovative and creative and part of what they did. But so you should definitely watch those documentaries. But here's what I wanted to highlight. Jim and Jane Henson majored in what we used to call home economics. Not kidding. And they took what they learned in sewing and fabrics. They also took classes in the School of Performing Arts and theater and dance. and they made this fabric, this Jim's mom's old green coat and a ping pong ball cut in half and turned it into Kermit. I mean, it's amazing that what they brought to life. And what I really love about this is then later they partnered up with professional television commercial producers and educators to tackle a problem of, and some of you know this story, maybe a lot of you know the story. Sesame Street started with a grant from a foundation to try to help kids in inner cities who were not able to make it to school still get educated on basics. And so that was the genesis of Sesame Street. So you had very diverse people from different industries, different backgrounds, different cultures, different skill sets coming together to tackle this problem. And not only did they tackle this problem, but Sesame Street is still here today, bigger than ever, with a viable, sustainable business model that's not just donations and volunteers. It really is the quintessential innovation success story, not just for Maryland, but that I think that we can all draw inspiration from in what we do. That it's not always, well, anyway, there are many ways of doing it, but it really it's a team sport. Okay, so what we do at University of Maryland, the Hensons and Muppets are a great example of how we think about innovation more broadly. There's no one right definition of innovation and entrepreneurship. There are many different methodologies. People call them different things. At Maryland, we happen to call them the design thinking and lean startup, which I know a lot of you do as well. Some people like to say human-centered design or whatever. But basically, they're very similar. Design thinking is about building creative confidence, provides experiential learning with tools and processes and methods to help navigate ambiguity and complexity and tackle tough problems, ultimately leading to creative solutions. Lean startup complements it really well because once you have that creative solution, it's about this may work super well for 10 people over here, but how do you then bring it to 10,000 people or 10 million people without, again, relying solely on volunteers or donations? And you need a business model to do that. And Sesame Street has a business model. Nonprofits, which I'll get to in a little bit later, have a business model. So we try to teach that to scale the impact that people have. So we not only do this on campus, we've been very lucky to have had opportunities to work with many folks around the DMV. We've been contacted by Health and Human Services. We ran their innovation program, the HHS Idea Lab. It's called the HHS Ignite. We ran that for 5 years with them in partnership with them. We've been asked by NASA to do a design thinking and lean startup workshop for them. And what was kind of cool about that is they even wrote a paper called Design Thinking, Lean Startup, and High Technology Marketing for Human-Centered Systems Engineering. And basically, they were feeling an existential threat from the SpaceXs and whatnot. And they said, we need to learn the same tools and methods that startups are using as we reimagine how we do missions in the future. And they even wrote this paper about it, which is pretty cool. They gave us a little shout out in the paper as the academic institution that ran the workshops. So we've done this workshops with a variety of government agencies and nonprofits. And I wanted to share a couple reflections from some participants. I know these are hard to read, so I'll read just the bolded part. These are people who went through this workshop. These are government workers. I used to think I was afraid of change. Now I think through experimentation, prototyping, and collaboration, I can harness change. Another one, just jump in. Perfection is the enemy of progress. What is learned through iterative, scaffolded, and inclusive failure is often more informative than a one-off success. A couple others that I really liked. This ties back to, I think Cliff was talking about we need to do more listening, meet people where they are. So here's a reflection. I used to not think about empathy. Now I think about it all of the time. I don't remember if this is from the person that was from CMS, Medicare and Medicaid, and he kind of talked about like my life is all about statistics, and it's easy to lose track of who's at the other end of that statistic in the job that I'm doing, but there's actually a need for having that empathy in what we do. And then lastly, creativity is about creating environments and situations that open you to thinking in different ways. So I have a couple activities that I'm hoping will kind of build on that, getting everybody to participate, creating an environment to do so. Because at the end of the day, it's an experiential thing, so I can talk a lot about it, but the more effective thing is to let people dive in and try it. So I have an activity that we're going to dive into called Brain Spin. And it lets you give a little bit of a taste of another way of brainstorming. So Brainspin is actually a game that was created by a Maryland alum, Frankie Aberland. And what's going to happen in 2 slides is I'm going to show a figure just similar to what's on the playing cards here. It's just going to be a simple figure. And you're going to have 30 seconds to write down as many things as possible that you think that figure looks like. So in your folders, if you still have them, there's some post-it notes in here, but you can also jot it down on your phone or whatever's easy. It could be, if you want to do analog on paper, that's fine. If you want to do it on your phone, that's fine. But you can do this for 30 seconds. And what I'm going to ask you to do before I show the figure is that the online folks can play along, make your list too. And then I'm going to ask you when we're done to put your list in the Zoom chat. And Lizzie and Megan will keep an eye out for 2 or 3 that you can share out later. But I'm going to really encourage you to go for quantity. Try to write down as many things as you possibly can. Fun, intriguing, really weird answers. Let me get this queued up. And let's see. Okay, so here we go. 3, 2, 1, go. Fifteen seconds left. And 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. All right, continue your same list. All I'm doing is rotating in 90 degrees. So same list, not a different list. Keep going. What else does this look like? Another 30 seconds. About 10 seconds. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. All right, what I'm going to do, so online folks, you can type your list into the chat, but for the people here, get together with the 2 or 3 people closest to you and read out your answers. And this is kind of like categories. You know, in categories, if somebody has the same answer as you, you cross it out. So you cross out the answers that other people have, and then we'll hear a few that people have left over. So a couple minutes to share out with your 2 or 3 people closest to you. Sorry, it ended up working. I'm glad you gave me the heads up because I brought the speaker just in case. Oh, no. I'm so glad. Seriously, thank you so much for giving me the heads up. Since I had that, it worked out pretty well. Because I was playing it simultaneously and you try to sync it up. So it works.
I fear I wasn't creative enough for my answers. I have sandwich for the second one.
It's good. It's good.
It's for both because I feel like I can do this or this way.
All right, about another minute, and then we'll hear some of your unique answers out there. Okay, yeah, that'd be great. All right. Apologies. I know there's a larger group in the back, and with a larger group, it takes longer to compare answers. So I'm cutting you a little bit short. But it doesn't have to be your answer. But in your groups, what are 1 or 2 that you heard that only one person had that was kind of unusual, unique, or kind of a fun one? And we got a microphone that can go around. Just why don't we start here? What are 1 or 2 that were not crossed off from your group? Yeah. Or yeah.
We have at the box, Blackboard for Giants and Elves.
Blackboard for Giants. Okay, nice. How about over here? We'll hit like.
Yeah, we had Tetris.
Okay. Okay. Nice.
And then Bedframe.
No.
And also an open book.
Okay. Nice, nice. How about just another couple groups volunteer? The back looked like they had a lot of fun discussion back there, so we definitely need to hit that back corner.
We had tennis court,
Huh?
modern art,
Some
and
Rothko fans
then
maybe, you know.
just a 2D structure.
Nice, cool.
Megan, did you have one online while I'm walking over?
Great participation online. One of the unique ones for the vertical one is fence, and for the horizontal one, we have tea sandwich. Both great.
Nice, excellent.
We had a couple that have already been said in the other groups, but we had an equal sign for the second one, and a room divider for the first one.
Cool, nice, nice. Any last answers? Anybody? Oh yeah, wait, back there.
Got one?
So for the vertical one, we have fridge. And for the horizontal one, I'm gonna give us two. I put stairs and a cake.
Okay, nice. We've done this with lots of students, lots of groups. Oh, sorry, you want to go ahead, share, please.
A couple we had that weren't said yet are salt and pepper, Danish design, back of Cybertruck, mirror, and priority list.
Wow, got a good mix there. That all right, that's awesome. So just like in any workout, you warm up first and then you do the real thing. So that was our warm up, all right, which was terrific. You guys aced the warm up. But what we're gonna do now is however many answers you had the first time, try to double it. Try to go for quantity. And one of the here's a hack. And to really get to a high number, you have to turn off that part of your brain that's judging every answer. So just get them out there and just go for quantity, defer judgment. There are no bad answers in brainstorming. Okay, let me get the music queued up, and then I will start the next one. Okay, 3, 2, 1, go. "15 seconds. Five, 4, 3, 2, 1. 90 degrees, keep going, same list. Ten seconds. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. All right, same thing. Compare answers in your groups, and we'll just hear maybe one or two max from the different groups. And online folks, put them in the chat, and Lizzie and or Megan can share a couple from the chat. Yeah. I was only in graph by 4, right? Yeah. This is a good happy hour activity, right? It'd be fun to do this activity before and after happy hour and see the difference. Yeah, right. All right, about another minute, and then we'll share out. Yeah. Very creative. Yeah. Yeah, right, right. Yeah. All right, so I think we're gonna start at the back of the room this time. Same groups and just one or two unique answers that your group came up with. It doesn't have to be yours, just in your group. And the group of 8, the Uber group, the really large group, will give you maybe you can share 3 since they're so large. I heard you a lot of laughing over there, so yeah.
Okay, some that we had were a Quidditch goalpost.
Nice.
Which is personal favorite. A computer mouse and a bubble blower.
Oh, excellent, excellent. And 1 or 2.
Two unique ones that we had were toothpick with an olive.
Ooh, nice.
Oh, pencil sharpener.
Ah, okay.
And a Q-tip.
Nice. All right.
Yeah.
I like it. See, and happy hour is starting. So the toothpick with an olive is very, very fitting. I don't know if that influenced the answer at all, but yeah. And, oh, yeah, online.
Have for the vertical one location pin and for the horizontal one a key.
A key. All right. So like a Google Maps pin and also a key. I see some nodding, some other people excited that. Awesome. I'm sure so there's some really, really amazing answers out there that we didn't get to, but I wanted to kind of debrief this a little bit. And so one of the things I wanted to share is that part of the innovation process is building on the ideas of others. And one of the reasons I love this activity is I love looking out at everybody as we're doing this activity. And I did it again here. And what I see a lot of is when we're comparing answers, somebody's reading their list and I'll see some, oh yeah, some nodding heads, and then I'll get to one where they're like, kind of a puzzled look. And then there's this rapid look at well, let me go back. Can I go back one? Yeah, people will be looking at the figure and then thinking about it again, and then they'll do another look, and then eventually sometimes people are like, oh, okay, yeah, I kind of see it. But then they're also sometimes they're like, I don't know what you're on, but I don't see that. But here's the thing I wanted to emphasize about that. So building on the ideas of others, this is a reflection from a student in a class that I taught a couple years ago on the brainspin activity. And I know you can't see it, so I'm going to read it. But this student said the brainspin game activity was fun. Plus, it was a good way to demonstrate that different people look at the same problems and see different solutions, and that sometimes a change in perspective can open a new realm of possibilities. Like, wow, this 19-year-old kid said something really profound. Like I don't even need to say anything more than that. And sometimes that change in perspective can be something as simple as a 90-degree rotation, or it can be just leaning into their perspective. And what I wanted to add is that what's cool about that, I saw that, like people heard something like, puzzled look, a look. I'm going to lean into that perspective. I'm going to take another look. And sometimes you get there, but even if you didn't, how many of you might have gotten an additional idea that you would not have added on your list had you not heard this other thing that you still don't quite get, but it got you to build on the ideas? And that's a really key part of innovation as well. And the student summarized it so well, which is really cool. If you like Brainspin, Frankie actually sells it on his website. There's also another one more free one you can try out on our website. It's if you go the slide deck I'll share with Lizzie and Megan, so you'll get this out there. But there's a URL, go.umd.edu/learn to innovate, and it's got this whole asynchronous course with activities, things like this one. Okay, so let's see how we doing on time. I've got one more activity and then some wrap up. So this next activity is called the Teacup Challenge. And so part of design thinking is rapidly prototyping and testing solutions. And so we're going to get a small taste of that. And so what we're going to do is you're going to need your Post-it notes. But if you don't have Post-it notes, you can also choose to draw on your phone if you like. Your Notes app, if you'd like to try it this way, has a little pencil thing. If you click on that, it lets you just sketch on it. But you can either do it on Post-it notes or on your phone. So Those online can play along too. What I'm going to do, I'm going to divide this room in half right down the middle. So this side, I'm going to give you a set of instructions. You'll be group A. This side will be group B, and I'm going to give you different instructions. So online and folks, you're going to do the same thing as group A. So group A, all you're going to do, I'm going to give you 2 minutes to sketch a teacup with hot tea in it, and you can add as much detail, decoration, whatever you want, adornments to it, but you have 2 minutes and just try to sketch as nice a drawing as you can of a teacup with hot tea in it. And online folks, you do that too. So your 2 minutes start now. Go ahead and start sketching. Wait, B, group B, this half, you have something different. You're gonna sketch more Pictionary style, right? And Pictionary, the idea is it doesn't matter how good it looks, you just wanna get the idea across as quickly as possible. So you're gonna have 5 seconds for your sketch, all right? So your first sketch is going to be a cup, all right? Actually a teacup. Okay, so ready, set, go. Teacup. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. All right, stop. Now share your drawing with your neighbors. Just flip it around and show it to the people around you. All right. Group A, you're still drawing. You still have about a minute and a half, or no, about, yeah, a little over a minute left. Okay. Group B, second drawing, you can do it on the back of the Post-it, a fresh one, whatever you want to do. Your second drawing is a teacup with liquid in it. All right, so ready, go. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. All right, go ahead and show it to your neighbors. Have a laugh, have a chuckle, compliment, whatever. Group A, you got about 40 seconds left on your drawing. All right, Group B, third drawing. 5 seconds again, and it's going to be, surprise, surprise, a teacup with hot tea in it. Ready, go. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, so here's what we're going to do. There's plenty of room in the back. So on those 2 window panes, so we're going to do group A, you're going to take your, if you did it on a Post-it, take your drawing and put it on this window pane over here. All right. And then group B, take your third drawing and put it on this window pane over here. So everybody get up and stick them up here. And I want you to take a look, walk by both group A's window pane and group B's window pane and take a look at all the sketches. All right, group A, I didn't do it, I did a right to left, didn't I? So A is the 2-minute one, B is the 5-second one. And make sure you take a quick look at both. Let me see. Oh, cool. I like that you did it digitally. Can I see? Ooh. And it's hard to draw with your finger. That's impressive. And color, nice. And yeah, you got the added benefit of you had color. I like those. Those were great. Thank you for doing that. Oh. All right. So for those online, since you don't have the benefit of walking over and looking out at this beautiful plaza, what I have on this slide is not that different than what everybody in the room has seen. Maybe just flipped. Oh, so what you see a lot of for the 2-minute drawings, and I saw a couple of these, there's some pretty phenomenal drawings. In 2 minutes, it's pretty phenomenal what some people did in 2 minutes in terms of shading, perspective, maybe they wrote a little, decorated the mug, right? And then the 5-second drawings, group B, what you saw a lot of is more what's on this slide, at least, what's on the right. But here, I want to, so just real quick, from group B, what was something that was different in your instructions compared to group A? There are multiple things, but just give me time. Like, how long do you have? 5 seconds as opposed to 2 minutes. What else was different? Something else was anybody? Progressively, do you remember? You did 3. So what was the progression? First, right? Teacup with liquid, and then teacup with hot tea in it, which is what you were assigned, right? And then crucially, what did you get to do in between rounds? Anybody? You got to look at others. So did anybody see something on somebody else and like, oh, That's a cool way to show steam. I'm going to steal that. Or, ooh, somebody drew a little tea bag. I'm going to steal that. I see some nodding, right? So here's the quick takeaway on this fun activity, which I stole from a guy named Daniel Yee, who used to run an innovation program at Department of Justice. Yes, Department of Justice had an innovation program. And what I love about this activity is that there are 5-second teacups and 2-minute teacups in all our jobs. There is a time and place where you have to do the equivalent of the 2-minute detailed teacup drawing. Maybe it's a final presentation to the director, maybe whatever it is, it needs to be properly formatted, you need a spell check, you need all that kind of stuff. There is absolutely a time and place for that. There's also a time and place where that's not the right approach, where the 5-second teacup is exactly what you want to do, because in the time that you got to test 3 different iterative examples and learn each one, that was the same time that they spent over here. And just imagine, not saying this happened in this group, but just imagine you did a 2-minute teacup drawing, you showed it to somebody, and somebody's like, boy, that really sucks. Like, that's awful. You'd be hurt a little bit. Whereas the 5-second teacup group, if you show that to somebody, it's like, well, that's one of the worst things I've ever seen. You spent all of 5 seconds on it, and now you move on to the next iteration. Hey, I saw somebody else sketch something like this. I'm going to go with that instead next time. So you get to learn a lot in the same amount of time. And all that matters is getting the idea across, because both these, as well as all those on the window panes there, do an equally good job of conveying the idea of teacup with hot tea in it. But in this case, the 5-second one, you got chances to iterate, get feedback, and you're not so personally or financially invested in it that there's a downside to crumpling it up and starting over. So that's a little bit of like the design thinking, prototyping, and testing rapidly. Again, a student has, in their reflection, sometimes just teach far better than I do. So this student said, I have always had ample time to plan and have a formulated guideline as to what the heck I'm doing. This class, I was robbed of that, and specifically the teacup example, but this class, I was robbed of that ample time, but it was the best experience possible because it unlocked new skills and abilities I had never known I had. And the basic idea is like, you get this assignment, and you need to, and you're told you need to do this in 3 months. Like, oh my gosh, that's impossible. How can we possibly do that in 3 months? Well, shift to the 5-second teacup mode. What can you learn in those 3 months? Not what can you complete and have a beautiful 2-minute drawing in 3 months. And then actually, as a fun exercise, half the number of the amount of time you've been given. They said 3 months. What can we do in 6 weeks? Heck, what can we do in 3 weeks? Along the lines of the 5-second teacup. And it's freeing, it's liberating, and it lowers the stakes on failure so much, and you can you just have a better way of tackling the approach. How are we doing on time? Okay, so I'm going to jump ahead. We're running out of time here, so I'll just mention that we also have different experiential activities to jump into Lean Startup. But basically what I said before is that this is how you scale a solution. I want to give one quick example. Let me jump ahead to the most relevant slides. So oops, let me go back. So Lean Startup, this is an oversimplification, but one of the key pieces of Lean Startup is who is your customer segment or your key stakeholder, decision maker, payer, stakeholders, and then what are their value propositions. And a simple way of thinking about it is your customer segment is who makes the decision in an organization for how people's time and how that organization's money is deployed. Could be one person, could be a committee, it varies. And the value proposition is just complementary with that. It's like, how do they make those decisions? Does it seem totally random? Some organizations like that. Or do they seem to have a strategic plan or heuristic or a clear prioritization that you have a pretty good guess on how they apportion people's time and budget? And basically, Lean Startup's like, go figure that out. Go talk to them. See if they'll tell you about that. And so the example I wanted to share is with Teach for America. This was a huge lesson learned for me when I got to meet Kai Kong. He was a program officer at the Gates Foundation. He's the one that asked me to look at the Teach for America financials. And I know it's a little hard to see, but basically, Teach for America gets about $300 million in revenue every year. And they use that to pay recent graduates to go teach in schools around the country that can't afford, the public school systems that can't afford enough teachers. It's a great program. But 2/3 of that 300 million is from donations, like the Gates Foundation and others. However, 1/3 of that 300 million, a full 100 million of it, they earn from things like fees for service, licensing fees, contracts, the same kinds of things that for-profit companies do. Nonprofits are allowed to conduct those kinds of activities if it furthers their mission. And what Kai told me at the Gates Foundation says the reason you should look at this is we tell all our potential applicants to look at this because Kai, this was the aha moment for me. Kai said, if I'm looking at two proposals, both are really tackling really important challenges, and one of them is my personal favorite that I've actually had a passion about since I was way, way, way young. But if the one that I'm personally most interested in, where if I donate $2 and they only have $2 of impact, versus this other one that's more of the Teach for America model, where if I donate $2, they have $3 of impact because they generated that third dollar on their own, I'm obligated to fund this other proposal 100% of the time, even though this other one might be my personal favorite. And when I heard that, when I talk about it now, it seems pretty obvious to me, but I had no idea that was the case before he told that to me. And I would have thought that before, all I need to do is write a proposal that says, look how big this problem is, look at our team and how, our great idea, and here's some evidence of both about us and our solution. Write the check so we can go do this. And I would have been wrong. I would have been wrong because he also wanted to see, are there dollars additive? Do I have other ways of bringing in revenue? And until I knew that, I would have failed in my proposal. But Kai is very open. He's happy to tell that to anybody. So it's actually a pretty easy thing to solve if you go and talk to the decision makers. Although I understand it can be harder to get time from decision makers sometimes. But here's the thing that I wanted to kind of the analogy I wanted to use. When I was working in a startup, I spent 15 years out in Silicon Valley working at a tech startup. It boggled my mind initially that I thought if we have some amazing technological solution, if it solved 50% of somebody's problem, or maybe even 75% of somebody's problem, or even 90% of somebody's problem, why wouldn't they buy it? And what we learned the hard way by almost going bankrupt within like 2 months of going bankrupt is that even if you solve 90% of somebody's problem, a customer won't buy it. And the reason I like using the puzzle analogy because what we realized was that for what Kai talked about with the Gates Foundation, my understanding, which was wrong, was I just had to write this really compelling proposal about the social benefit. We're the right team, here's a big enough problem, this is our approach. And so in terms of a puzzle, I thought we had the perfect last piece of a puzzle that fits there. But what I didn't know is my perception of the puzzle was wrong. I was right for the lower half of the puzzle, but there was this whole other part of the puzzle I wasn't aware of, which is I need to have additive dollars for it to matter. And that explains why a 90% solution does somebody no good, just in the same way a 90% last piece of the puzzle will not fit in that last space. You do not get the benefit, reap the rewards of completing the puzzle unless it's 100% exact fit. And that, oh, that's why nobody would buy our product, even though I thought it did almost everything they need, because they still need to go out and find that remaining bit to reap the full rewards. And so that's like a big aha for Lean Startup. And then to wrap, I'm going to jump ahead here. When we did this workshop, I just wanted to share a couple examples when we did this workshop with HHS. So we had them map this out. I'm trying to decide which ones to show quickly because I know what for. So the Washington Post even wrote up an article about this program, this ideation program, the HHS Ignite program, offers an education and design thinking to boost projects that aim to solve the agency's problems, large and small. And one example, just one example, but is by Marlisa Rivera. This is from their demo day presentation to the secretary, improving access care in Indian Health Service emergency rooms by a fast track system. So they came in wanting to tackle the problem that I'm not going to show the video. Ooh, can I go ahead? This is their slide. They came in wanting to solve the problem that for this health center on this reservation, that on average wait times were oftentimes 2 to 4 hours, and more than about 25% of visitors to the ER got tired of waiting and would eventually leave. And sometimes they had something really serious where they might later have to be medevaced or whatever else. So they thought, hey, we could have these electronic kiosks, and that way they can get what they need and get out and reduce these waiting times. But in the 5-second teacup mode, they learned so much by what didn't work. One of the big things they found out is that there's this law called EMTALA, EMTALA, the Emergency Medical Treatment and Active Labor Act. Anybody heard of this? Yeah, I see some nodding heads. So for those that don't know, this is a law that ensures if somebody can't afford hospital care but shows up in an emergency room in dire circumstances, that the hospital is obligated to treat them. You can't say, sorry, if you don't have a credit card, we can't treat you. And what they learn is these kiosks do not meet the sufficient criteria as medical care. So they were violating EMTALA in a weird way because no, you're denying them access to actually seeing an actual doctor. Well, okay, 5-second teacup, they balled it up, threw it away, let's start again. And they went to talk to different folks, decision makers at the hospital. And what they learned was that since 1 in 4, 1 in 5 people walked out of the emergency room, they also learned about reimbursement. The way the hospital worked is that for every patient they saw, the insurance company would reimburse them a certain amount. So they did the basic calculation, X number of people walking out of the door every month, every year, on average, a billing from the insurance company that comes to so-and-so. They realized that $6 million was walking out the door every year. If they had seen those patients, that was $6 million that the insurance company would reimburse the hospital. Now they had the full sense of the puzzle and they said, hey, would you like to recapture some of that $6 million that you're not seeing right now? Absolutely. Like, would you be willing to invest 1/10 of that in something that can help us address this? Absolutely. That completely changed the conversation. That got them moving in the right direction. And I love that story. It covers a lot of what we talked about here about not being too invested in, oh, I've got this ingenious app that's going to do so-and-so. You got to listen to your stakeholders. You got to meet them where they are. It starts with empathy. I think, yeah, I'm going to stop there. I have more examples. I'm happy to chat more about them at happy hour. That's just one of really some fantastic ideas. And I'm going to jump to the end. Again, I'll share these slides. So they're going to come out to everybody, but I have some links that when you get them, in case you're interested in learning about more. I know University of Maryland, there are folks that continue to do workshops for different agencies and nonprofits. So feel free to reach out to them on the contact page or talk to me. I think we've got champagne that's starting to get warm, so I'm going to stop here. Thanks for, I know it's been a long day, but yeah, thank you.
Shorter. Thank you. That was so great and so much fun. I've learned you all have very creative minds. I will now pass things over to Tim Sussman for some closing remarks, and then we will start happy hour. One more thing. One more thing I forgot. We are extending the raffle for 20 more minutes into happy hour, and then we will draw a winner. If you leave before then, we do have everyone's emails, so we will email you.
Is it happy hour yet? First, big thank you to Lizzie and Megan and all of our IdeaScale help online in the virtual world. Hello. Thank you for your help in having people join today. This is all about you. Each of you attending today, this is community-driven innovation. What we're a part of today in this movement, it's today and it's moving forward. This movement is just growing. And it's only possible because of each of you. So Dean, I love the remark on the different people with the different ideas, providing different perspectives, and generating new solutions. I think it's interesting to also consider what problems are we solving, and is it the correct problem? Are we asking the right questions? And the more we reach out and diversify our constituent base in this community, in this crowd, that's how we're going to sense problems that matter and that really need to be solved. I'm supposed to kick off happy hour, so here's a toast. If you have a cup in the room, most of you do, please raise it. This is a toast to you, the change makers. So to you, to change makers, appreciate all of you. Cheers. And thank you to our great speakers. Thank you to everyone online. This concludes the Innovation Summit.